So, everyone, welcome to Kailul Kol Shira in partnership with Breslov.org. And today we're going to look at a beautiful Torah, such an important concept of Nidarim. Okay, in the Parsha we have so many different things. We have Nidarim, we talk about different different things, and then the positions of the Levium, and they had to carry the Mishkan, and they were in charge of watching who came in and who didn't come into the Mishkan, and so on. And there's just so many topics there to discuss, and I just found this one to be very, very interesting, because again, all of those things are very, very nice, but here's something that pertains to us today. And again, anything that we can benefit by, I always like to try to take advantage on. So we all know there's a parsha in the Torah of Nedarim, right? We can make a neder, right? That one can make a neder that he will not or will do a certain thing, right? A person can make a neder that he's going to give $100 for tzedakah, right? And then he has to do it. He's now chayiv to give that $100 for tzedakah min Torah, because the Torah gives the person the ability to utter the words and to make that neder. So let's see what the Rebbi says here today. Ish or isha kiyafli ninder. If a man or a lady makes a neder, ayidei mitzvah shel nidarim royin mevinim goydel oitzim koyach hadiber. So we see, Rav Nassan's teaching us here, we see the awesome power that we have through our speech. You know, there's an expression that I heard years ago in English. They say talk is cheap, but it's not true. It's not true at all. Talk is not cheap. Talk is very, very important, right? A person can use his words for Torah or Tefillah. A person can use his words for Lashon Hara, for disparagement, Chas v'Shalom, right? A person can use his words to make a neder, and to watch how it works. Shetekev mevate sifasav. As soon as he utters from his lips, tzarich lekayim kol kechol hayotzim mipiv. Everything that he uttered, he has to fulfill. Ki b'emes inyan nidarim hu pliya nizgova. It's a very awesome thing. This concept of nidarim, of making a neder, to promise, to make a promise, a swear, and a shvua, right, is a very, 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 very powerful thing. Bechinas ish ki yafli lindar neder nazir. If a person makes upon himself, you know, there's a person can make a neder, he wants to become a nazir, right? So what does that mean? He takes upon himself naziris, that he won't partake in any wine, he won't cut his hair for 30 days, and so on like that. Stam naziris, right? Kihem bechinas pliyas chachma. This is a wondrous chachma. Kamuva b'Torah shalu Rabbi Yossi ben Kusma. Okay, and it's in Siman Nun Zayin Torah 57 in Lekut Ram. Ki b'zer royim gedulas ha'adam habal b'chira sheyesh lo koyach b'piv lases la'atzmai mitzvah is chadashim. Shaloi nitztavim b'hem.
In progress.
That they weren't. He wasn't commanded upon. A person can make upon himself a new mitzvah, and he's obligated to fulfill that mitzvah as much as any other mitzvah. Why? Because he uttered words. It's a fascinating concept. Does anyone have any questions on this? Any concepts, or anyone want to say anything? Rabbi Yaakov, Ernie, anyone? No, everyone agrees, right? So in other words, you say words, and that becomes, you have now a Torah obligation to fulfill those words. A person says makes a neder. I make a neder. The person says, I won't eat cheesecake. Now that person can't eat cheesecake. But he said, well, you know, it was before Shavuos, and I didn't realize. No, you made a neder. You have to fulfill those words. That person can't eat that cheesecake the same way he can't eat a pork sandwich. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing, because he said those words. Fascinating. Okay, take it. Nesa olav adova muta b'isur Torah. Right away, it comes upon him a prohibition like any other Torah prohibition. V'hu pliya. This is a wonder. Because really, in the shayrish, like the example we just used, the cheesecake, there's nothing wrong with eating a piece of cheesecake. Everyone loves a piece of cheesecake. There's nothing wrong with it. If you have cheese, if you have a cheesecake that was made with, especially if it was made with chalav Yisrael, milk, and everything was done the right way, what's wrong with eating a piece of cheesecake? Right? What's wrong with it? Because there's nothing wrong. Even if the person doesn't mention Hashem's name, he just says, I promise I won't do this or that. He makes a promise. The person makes a promise. It has upon him the same Torah prohibition at that moment because he uttered those words. No one asked him to utter the words. He wasn't forced to utter these words. He chose to utter the words. And because he chose to utter these words now, they forbid him for taking part in whatever he made that neder. Okay. So this we see how empowering this is. A person, a Jew is. We are all people that we have free choice. We can do this. We have the ability with our own free choice to make the neder. The main kayach that we have is in our mouth. Kayach is bepeh, in our mouth and in our heart. If the heart desires, that the heart wants to sanctify itself in a certain way, or the heart desires that it wants to stay away, absolve itself from something for a spiritual reason. And he utters his desire, his will with his mouth. So he makes from that Torah. That now becomes Torah law. Because we know that the Nefesh Yisrael, every single Jew, you and me, every single Jew has a Nefesh Elikus, every single Jew. And that is a chelik elikamimal. That's a part of kiviyachol of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Vu ba'atzmei bechinas Torah. So each and every one of us is an aspect of Torah ourselves. Why? Because if we have in us the chelik elikamimal, and the chelik elikamimal we know is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we know that Torah is one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Klal Yisrael is one with the Rebbeinu Shalom, and one with the Torah. So of course, when a person takes upon himself to do something, of course it becomes Torah. Like we just said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah, and Klal Yisrael is one. We're one unit. And therefore the person has the wherewithal within himself to make this neder and to make for himself a brand new mitzvah that's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. The main idea is for a neder is to be able to make that neder in order to sanctify the person and or to keep him in distance from something that he has a desire for that he should not be engaging in. So the person can make a neder, and then if he makes that neder, it'll make such an impression on him that he uttered these words that he can't do this thing. So even though he shouldn't do it anyway, but this is a reinforcement. It becomes now a reinforcement that since he uttered those words, he can now absolve himself from whatever desire that he's trying to stay away from. V'chinas nedarim siyag leprishas. As Pirkei Yaveh says, a neder is a gate, is a fence for precious to absolve a person from engaging in things that are not proper. Sheilu anedarim heim mitzvah nindar bahem. And to these type of things, it's a mitzvah to make a neder. V'chein amru shari le lanesh lenindar ulezeruze nafshe v'ika neder kishemaytzi bepiv. The main thing is that he says it with his mouth, and that's what we're saying here. The main thing is he utters with his mouth. Is there royim goydel koyach hadiber umavitz sifasayim ki shel adam shal yedei hadiber hu yachal is gabe beyoyse lifroi shes atzmai afilu min haheter. Because through this a person can separate himself from even something that he's mutter to do. Like our example with the cheesecake. Kamay shamar nedarim siag leprishas. Kamay shirayim b'chush mikol mi shiraitzel lahargel esatzmei beize kedusha prishas nimsayim habe shaisim neder oy shvua alzeh. And we see this many times, and we saw this through Chazal, and we saw this through all the tzaddikim, we saw this through a lot of Erlich Yidden, that they would make a neder if they wanted to stay away from something or to make sure they would do a certain thing as far as Kedusha goes, and they would make the neder. Or they would want to make a tightness on a certain day. They won't eat a davar minachai. Of course, no one would not. Who says anyone's going to do that? They're not going to take a limb off an animal anyway. But okay, if the person, there are different rules on how much money you have to give the tzedakah, based on how much money that you earned and so on. So if a person wants to give more, so he can make himself, he can make a neder and say that he's taking upon himself this extra money because he wants to give it. This is really a wonder. If he has the wherewithal in order to overpower his Yetzirah, so then why can't he overpower his Yetzirah without the shvua? Why do you need it for? Why do you need the neder? Why do you need the shvua? And then if he's worried, hey, but maybe I won't be able to do this anyway, so then what's the neder going to help? In other words, we're trying to understand what is the purpose of the neder. If the person is such a strong person that he can do what he says he's going to do, so then why does he need the neder? If he can't do what he says he's going to do, then what's the purpose of making the neder? Now he'll violate two things. He'll violate what he shouldn't have done, and he'll violate the neder as well. So we're trying to understand this. Through this we see the great value of a neder. It comes into some wondrous chachma, some wondrous wisdom. That's the place of bechira. There's a place called Pliyas Chachma. And when you come to that place, you get a special thrust of power that a person can utter that neder. Yuchal is gaber al masha tzarich is gaber, and that's the way the person can overpower what he's supposed to overpower and supposed to not accomplish. B'vaday gam acher kach kisheosa neder adayin yesh lo koyach lebechira. But you know that even though he made the neder, he still has the koyach of bechira, a free choice. La tosei chas v'sholom. That the bechira can make him fall, right? Can make him make a mistake, chas v'sholom. Ki ha-bechira yesh lo koyach gadol miyod, because bechira, the free will has a lot of power to it. So in other words, wait a second. So the guy made this. Okay, yeah, I understand. I connected this place called Pliyas Chachma. I got that. Okay, but and I understand that it's going to help me a lot. But the problem is over here, bechira is also very powerful. So now if I have my bechira I may say, I was going to give $10,000 for tzedakah. Let's use that example. And then he says that, even though he wasn't chayiv to give $10,000 tzedakah, but he uttered he's going to give $10,000. So now the bechira comes in, and bechira says free choice. Says, wait a second, you have free choice. You don't have to give the 10,000. Even though he connected to the the Plias Chachmas, but even though he has this bechira, so how does that work? Val kain his hira Torah mi'oid sheyishma lekayim es nidroi, and therefore the Torah is so what's a good word to use? The Torah is so convincing. Let's use that word. L'kayim es nidrei, that a person should certainly fulfill his neder, his promises that he makes. Ukichol hayotzim mepiv yaseh, anything that utters out of his mouth he should do. Avalekuhu shal yedei neder. But the main thing is through the neder. Yesh lo koyach harbe yoyse l'sgaber hayitzrei. But the main thing to know that through the neder the person will have a lot of koyach to overpower his Yetzer Hara, which is the Bechira. We just had it now. I thought this was very nice. We just laid Megillas Rus. It was so beautiful in our shul. We had the opportunity, the first time I ever saw this, they had mamash a klaf, and they read Megillas Rus on a klaf. I never was zeichet to hear that before. It was so beautiful. Mamash. Chai Hashem Shichvi Ana Abayker. So Baya said to Rus, you could stay with me to the night. Everything's going to be okay. He made a Yetzer Hara. He made that shua to his Yetzer Hara, so he shouldn't chas v'shalom come to be with Rus when he shouldn't be. So he made that in shvua. You see here that tzaddik Bayas was the tzaddik Adar, and he made a neder in order to make sure he would not do the wrong thing. Chas v'shalom. Nimsa shebelo yashvua hayasvarish hayetzer hara is gaber olav. So Bayas was thinking, why did he make this shvua? Because he knows he has a Yetzer Hara, and he knew that without a shvua, maybe the Yetzer Hara will come and have some convoluted excuse that it's really a mitzvah to do, and so on and so on. And it was a mitzvah. They say it was really yibav. Okay, whatever it was. K'may shamar b'seinuzal b'zeh ayedei hashvua Omad bin Israel, and we see that through the shvua he was able to stand the test. The Kavash es Yitzray, he was able to vanquish the Yetzer Hara. And so we see with many tzaddikim and righteous ones, and this is the time that's found in Shivchei Haran, and it's actually a lesson in Shivchei Haran. It's lesson 15. All right, so it's a very, very, very powerful lesson to show us the great value that a person has with their speech, and how important speech is, because a person can either can make something that's totally mutter for himself. He can make it asur on himself via the words. So too a person, like we said, Bayaz was able to make the shvua Chai Hashem Shichvi Ana Boiker, as Bayaz was able to say that in order to prevent the Yetzer Hara coming up with some kind of convoluted excuse that he can be together with Rus when he shouldn't be, and he didn't want to come to fall to the Yetzer Hara, and therefore Bayaz made that shvua. And we see that by the tzaddikim, this was a common thing. So we should understand the importance of speech, of how important it is, and anyone should always take their time to always speak to the Rabbeinu Shalom, words of his Baidudus. Everyone should take the time to read Tehillim. It's such a beautiful thing to connect to David HaMelech, to connect to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? No? Okay. Shkoyach.